I was sitting at the wide pine desk in the main room of the cabin outside Bozeman when the courier envelope arrived. The morning light came through the tall windows and fell across the papers in a clean line. I had been reviewing the latest supplier contracts for Summit and Sage, the brand I had built over the past 8 years. The work was steady and exact. I liked it that way. The envelope had no return address, only my name typed on the front. My assistant in town sometimes sent flagged documents this way when something looked off. I opened it without hurry. Inside were printed bank statements and a separate sheet that looked like a phone log. The first page showed 3 large transfers from the operating account of the LLC that held the cabin property. The amounts were written in clear black ink. None of them carried my signature or authorization. I set the pages down in order and read the log next. The calls were short, most under 4 minutes. The numbers belonged to my mother, my Aunt Edith, and my brother Colin. The dates ran across the previous 6 weeks. One call from my mother to my aunt lasted 11 minutes on a Tuesday morning. Another from my aunt to Colin happened the same afternoon. The pattern was quiet and consistent. I did not raise my voice or stand up. I simply turned the pages again and noted the exact times. If you have ever watched numbers on a page rearrange the ground beneath your feet, you know the particular stillness that follows. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer first. He was in his office in town and answered on the second ring. I told him what I had found and asked him to pull the title records on the cabin. He said he would call me back within the hour. Then I sat back in the chair and waited. The fire in the stone hearth had burned down to coals. I did not add another log. My mother called 20 minutes later. I let it ring once before I answered. Her voice came through the line, already in motion. "Victoria, I need you to stop whatever you're doing and listen to me right now," she said. The words arrived, fast and tight. "Your brother is in a difficult spot. We all know how hard he has worked to get back on his feet. The cabin is sitting there empty most of the year. It makes sense for it to be in his name for a while. You have the brand and the online sales. You do not need the property, too." I kept my tone even. The cabin is titled under the LLCI control. Any transfer requires my signature and board approval if we are treating it as a business asset. I did not sign anything. She made a sharp sound, half laugh, and half breath. "You and your paperwork. Always hiding behind signatures and lawyers. Family does not run on signatures. Family runs on who shows up when someone needs help. Colin needs stability right now. He has that new consulting arrangement. Having the cabin in his name gives him collateral. It is temporary. You are being dramatic." I heard my Aunt Edith's voice in the background, low and steady, feeding her lines. My mother switched without pause. "Do not make me repeat myself, Victoria. You have always been the one who could afford to be selfish. Colin cannot. He has responsibilities. If you fight this, I will have to explain to everyone how you refused to help your own brother when he was finally trying to build something real. People will understand what kind of person that makes you." The line went quiet for a moment. I could hear her breathing change. When she spoke again, her voice had softened into something almost pleading, but the words stayed sharp. "I am not asking Victoria. I am telling you how this is going to go. Sign the papers my lawyer sends over this afternoon. Make it clean, or I will make sure your business partners hear exactly how you treat family when money is involved. Cassandra has already expressed concern about stability. She understands how these things look from the outside." I did not answer right away. The mention of Cassandra Bell, my business partner who handled supplier relations and retail partnerships, landed without surprise. My mother had been circling her for weeks. I had seen the pattern in the call log. My mother filled the silence. "You think you are so independent up there in that cabin. You think the mountain air makes you above all this. It does not. Blood is blood. You will sign or you will watch everything you built start to crack. I can make that happen with one conversation." I kept my voice flat. "I will look at whatever documents arrive. I am not agreeing to anything over the phone." She let out a short, unstable laugh. "Of course you are not. You never make anything simple. Just remember who raised you. Remember who was there before you had any of this. Do not make me remind you in ways you will not like." The call ended. I placed the phone face down on the desk and looked at the printed log again. The calls between my mother and my aunt had increased in frequency after the first transfer. My brother's number appeared on the receiving end of most of them. The slush fund my mother had helped set up for him years earlier was still active. The statements showed regular movements into an account that carried his name, but was never discussed at family dinners. I stood and walked to the window. The pine trees stood dark against the bright Montana sky. The cabin was quiet except for the low crack of the remaining coals. I had built this place with clear intention. It was meant to be the one asset that stayed separate, the place where product testing happened and where I could work without the noise of the main company. Now the title was moving without my consent. My lawyer called back before noon. The title search showed a quiet amendment filed 3 weeks earlier. It listed a trust with my brother as beneficiary and my Aunt Edith as trustee. The signature on the amendment was not mine. It was a close copy, but the pressure on the pen had been different. Someone had used an old document and altered it. The lawyer said he was already drafting a formal challenge and would file it that afternoon. He also said the bank had flagged the account activity and placed a temporary hold, pending verification. I thanked him and hung up. Then I called Cassandra Bell. She answered on the first ring and sounded guarded. "Victoria, I was going to call you," she said. "Your mother reached out yesterday. She said there was some family restructuring happening with the cabin and that it might affect the retreat schedule for next quarter. She asked if I had seen any paperwork. I told her I had not. She seemed insistent. I kept my answer short. There is no restructuring. The title change was not authorized. I am handling it with counsel. I need to know if she or my aunt contacted any of the suppliers or retail partners." Cassandra paused. When she spoke again, her voice had lost some of its usual steadiness. "She called 2 of the larger accounts last week. She told them you were dealing with a family health situation and that decisions about the brand might need to wait. One of them asked me if everything was stable. I said yes. I did not know what else to say." I felt the first clear shift in the room. Cassandra had chosen the version of the story my mother had given her. She had not called me first. "I understand," I said. "I will send you the lawyer's filing once it is complete. Until then, please direct any questions about the brand to me directly." She agreed too quickly and ended the call. I set the phone down and returned to the desk. The printed log and statements were still spread in the order I had left them. The pattern was now obvious. My mother had coordinated the transfer through my aunt. My brother had received the benefit through the trust. The slush fund had been the quiet pipeline for years. My business partner had been pulled in at the edges, offered a version of events that made me look unstable. I did not feel anger in the usual sense. I felt the particular cold clarity that arrives when a long pattern finally shows its edges. I picked up the phone log and folded it once. Then I placed it inside the folder with the bank statements. The lawyer would need the originals. The bank would need them too. Outside the window, the light had shifted. Afternoon was moving across the valley. I had one more call to make before the documents arrived from my mother's lawyer. I needed to speak with the security consultant who monitored the cabin systems and the private road. Marcus Hale had installed the cameras and the gate code system 2 years earlier. He answered on the third ring and listened without interruption while I explained the situation in plain terms. "I need the access logs for the gate and any motion alerts from the past month," I said. "And I need the system set so that no one enters without my direct code confirmation. No exceptions. Marcus said he would pull the logs within the hour and send them encrypted. He also said he would adjust the permissions immediately." His voice stayed professional and detached, the same tone I used when I spoke to him. It was useful. I ended the call and looked once more at the papers on the desk. The transfers were already in motion. The trust existed on paper. My mother had made her position clear on the phone. My aunt had worked the legal side in silence. My brother had stayed in the background collecting the benefit. Cassandra had accepted the story she was given. I closed the folder. The cabin remained quiet. The only sound was the low settling of the coals in the hearth. I had built this place to be separate and protected. Now it was the center of a quiet rearrangement that had been happening for weeks without my knowledge. The next documents would arrive soon. I would read them the same way I had read the statements in the log, line by line, without hurry, without assumption. The phone on the desk lit up again. My mother's number showed on the screen. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. Her voice came through, already moving, already certain of the outcome she wanted. My mother's voice came through, already moving, already certain of the outcome she wanted. She did not wait for me to speak. "Victoria, the papers are with my lawyer right now. He is sending them over as we speak. All you have to do is sign the amendment, and the trust takes over the cabin. It is cleaner this way. Colin can use the equity for his consulting work without anyone asking questions every time he needs a signature. You keep the brand and the sales. Everyone wins." Her tone was brisk at first, the way she spoke when she had already decided the ending. Then it shifted without warning. "You have no idea what it has been like for him. He tried. He really tried after the last setback. That private account was only supposed to be temporary something to keep things moving while he rebuilt. Your father and I helped, because that is what parents do. We did not expect you to understand. You have always been able to walk away from things that got difficult." I heard my Aunt Edith's voice in the background again, low and steady, prompting her. My mother's breathing changed. When she spoke next, the words came faster and thinner. "I am not going to beg you, Victoria. I raised 2 children. I know when one of them is being deliberately difficult. You sit up there in that cabin like it makes you separate from the rest of us. It does not. The cabin was bought with family resources in the beginning. You know that. Pretending otherwise does not change the record." She paused. I could hear her moving something on her end, a drawer, or a stack of papers. The sound was sharp. "Sign it today. Do not make me involve Cassandra or the suppliers. I already spoke with 2 of them last week. They were polite, but they asked the right questions. They want to know the brand is stable. If I have to explain that you are refusing to help your own brother keep a roof over his head while he gets back on track, they will understand. People always understand when it is about family." Her voice cracked on the last word, then hardened again in the same breath. The swing was quick and practiced. "Do not act like this is a surprise. You have been pulling away for years. The cabin was the last piece that still tied you here. Now it can help Colin instead of sitting empty while you play at being self-made. Sign the papers. Make it simple. Or I will make sure the next conversation you have with your partners is not one you want." I kept my reply short and level. "I have already spoken with my lawyer. The title change was not authorized. The bank has placed a hold. Any further movement will be documented as an attempt to transfer without consent." She made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "Your lawyer." "Of course. Always the paperwork. You think that protects you from what actually matters. It does not. Blood still counts more than any signature you can buy. Ask Cassandra how she feels about working with someone who treats her own family like strangers when money is on the table. She already knows the version I gave her." She did not push back. The line went quiet for a few seconds. I could hear my aunt again murmuring something I could not catch. My mother came back on her voice, lower now, almost tired. "Colin does not know I am calling you like this. He would hate it. He still thinks you might come around on your own. He has always given you more credit than you deserve. That private account was never meant to hurt the brand. It was only to keep things afloat when his last project fell through. Your father and I covered what we could. The rest came from the operating funds, because that is what family does when one person is trying to recover. You would rather see him fail than give up one piece of property you barely use." I did not argue the details. The statements in the envelope had already shown the pattern. Regular movements into the account that carried Colin's name. The calls on the log lined up with the dates of those movements. My mother and my aunt had coordinated the timing. The trust amendment had been the final step. "I will review whatever arrives," I said. "I am not signing anything today." She exhaled hard. "You are impossible." "Fine. Wait for the documents. When you see them, remember that I tried to do this the easy way." Remember that I gave you the chance to keep this inside the family instead of turning it into something public and ugly. If it becomes ugly, that is on you." The call ended without a goodbye. I placed the phone back on the desk and opened the folder again. The printed statements showed the slush fund had been active for longer than I had first realized. Small amounts at first, then larger ones after Colin's last business attempt collapsed. The account was listed under a consulting name he had used before. The transfers from the Cabin LLC had been labeled as property management fees. My mother's name appeared on 2 of the authorization lines from earlier months. My aunt's name appeared on the trust paperwork. I called my lawyer again. He confirmed the bank had frozen further activity on the operating account pending verification of the unauthorized amendment. He had already filed the challenge with the county recorder and was preparing a demand letter to my mother's attorney. He also said the security logs from Marcus Hale had arrived. I opened the encrypted file on my laptop. The gate logs showed 2 entries in the past month that did not match my usual codes. One was from an unfamiliar vehicle registered to a rental company. The timestamp matched a date when my aunt had been in Montana for a conference she had mentioned in passing. The motion sensors near the cabin had triggered twice during that window. No one had entered the building itself, but someone had walked the perimeter. The second entry was from a different vehicle 3 days later. The plate trace came back to a local service my brother had used in the past. I closed the file and sat back. The pattern was now complete on paper. My mother had initiated the calls. My aunt had handled the quiet paperwork. My brother had received the benefit through the trust and the ongoing account. Cassandra had been given a version of events that painted me as the obstacle. The property itself had been the target because it carried clear equity and could be used as collateral without touching the main brand accounts I controlled more tightly. Marcus Hale called a few minutes later. His voice stayed flat and professional. "The logs are accurate. The rental vehicle stayed on the property for 40 minutes the first time. The second visit was shorter. No attempt was made to force entry. They tested the gate code twice before using the override sequence that was active at the time. I have already changed the master codes and added a secondary verification step that requires your direct confirmation through the app. No one else can bypass it now." I thanked him and asked him to keep the system on full alert. He agreed without extra questions. The formal documents from my mother's lawyer arrived by secure email an hour later. The amendment was clean on its face. It transferred the cabin from the LLC into the trust with Colin as sole beneficiary and my aunt as trustee. The signature line carried a version of my name that was close enough to pass a quick review, but not close enough to survive scrutiny. Attached was a short letter from my mother's attorney stating that the transfer was being presented as a family accommodation and that refusal would be treated as an act of bad faith in any future proceedings. I forwarded everything to my own lawyer. Then I called Cassandra again. She answered after 4 rings this time. "Victoria, I just got off the phone with your mother again," she said. Her voice was tighter than it had been earlier. "She said the cabin issue is moving forward and that you are resisting for reasons that do not make sense to her. She asked if I would be willing to speak with her lawyer about the brand's stability if things become contentious. I told her I would not do that without talking to you first. I kept my answer direct. The transfer was not authorized. The bank has frozen the account. My lawyer has filed a challenge. Any conversation with her lawyer should go through mine. I need to know if she contacted anyone else on the supplier or retail side." Cassandra hesitated. She mentioned 2 accounts by name. She said she wanted to reassure them that the retreat schedule would not be affected. I do not know if she actually called them or if she was testing me. Either way, the fact that she has their direct numbers is already a problem. I told her I would handle the outreach to those accounts myself, and that I would send her the lawyer's filing for her records. She agreed, but the agreement came with a pause that hadn't been there before. The side she was choosing was becoming visible in the spaces between her words. After the call, I returned to the desk. The printed phone log and statements were still in the folder. I added the new gate logs and the forwarded documents. The stack was now thick enough to require both hands to lift. The quiet rearrangement that had been happening for weeks was no longer quiet. It had names, dates, and signatures attached. I stood and walked to the window again. The light had begun to shift toward evening. The pines stood in the same dark line against the sky. Nothing outside the glass had changed. Inside the cabin, the papers on the desk had rearranged the next several weeks into something narrower and more exact. My mother had made her position clear. My aunt had done the paperwork in silence. My brother had stayed in the background while the benefit moved toward him. Cassandra had been offered a version of the story and had not rejected it outright. I picked up the phone one more time and called the bank directly. The representative confirmed the hold was in place and that any attempt to move funds or title without verified authorization would be blocked and reported. She also said a formal fraud review had been opened because of the mismatched signature on the amendment. I thanked her and hung up. The cabin was quiet again. I sat back at the desk and opened the folder one last time. The phone log sat on top. The calls between my mother and my aunt had continued even after the trust amendment was filed. The last call on the log had happened 2 days earlier. It had lasted 9 minutes. My brother's number was on the receiving end. I closed the folder and left it on the desk. The next move would come from one of 3 places: my mother's lawyer with more pressure, the bank with additional questions, or Marcus with updated security data. I had already set the counters in motion. The documents were challenged. The accounts were frozen. The gate codes were changed. The version of events my mother had given Cassandra was now on record with my own lawyer. Outside the window, the valley was settling into the long Montana evening. I remained at the desk, the papers in front of me, the phone within reach. The rearrangement was no longer silent. It was document contested and moving forward on multiple tracks at once. My mother had wanted the cabin signed over cleanly and quickly. She had not gotten that. What she had gotten instead was a record that now included every call, every transfer, and every attempt to bypass consent. The next document that arrived would have to answer to that record. The next document that arrived would have to answer to that record. It came by secure email just after dark. My mother's lawyer had attached the formal transfer papers, along with a short cover note stating that continued refusal would be documented as unreasonable obstruction. I forwarded it without comment and waited. Marcus Hale sent a short alert at 9 that evening. A vehicle matching the description my aunt had used before was approaching the private road. He had already notified the gate system to hold at the outer checkpoint. I told him to let them through to the cabin turnoff, but to keep the secondary verification active. I wanted the conversation on my ground recorded and limited. They arrived 20 minutes later. My mother stepped out first. My Aunt Edith followed, carrying a slim folder. Neither of them looked rushed. My mother's face was set in the expression she used when she had already decided she was the reasonable one in the room. My aunt's expression was calmer, almost administrative. I opened the door before they knocked. The cold mountain air moved past them into the cabin. I did not invite them inside. We stood on the wide porch under the motion lights Marcus had adjusted earlier. My mother spoke first. "You are making this harder than it needs to be, Victoria. We drove all the way out here because some conversations cannot happen over the phone. Sign the papers tonight and this ends cleanly. Your brother gets the stability he needs. You keep everything else. That is fair." Her voice was steady at the start. Then it cracked on the word fair and swung into something sharper. "You have always been like this. Cold, calculating. You built this place and this brand like they make you separate from the rest of us. They do not. The money that started the first orders came from family accounts. You paid it back, yes, but you would not have had the chance without us. Now, when your brother needs one single asset to get back on his feet, you act like we are stealing from you. It is selfish. It is small." My aunt opened the folder and held out the amendment page without speaking. The signature line was still there, the copied version of my name, clear under the porch light. I did not take the page. The signature is forged. The bank has already flagged it. The county recorder has the challenge filing. Any further attempt will be treated as fraud. My mother's face changed again. The sharpness left and something wetter moved in. Her voice dropped. Victoria, please. Colin is not like you. He cannot just start over every time something collapses. That account was only meant to keep him from losing everything while he tried to rebuild. Your father and I could not cover it all anymore. The cabin was the only thing left that could be moved, without touching the brand accounts you watch so closely. We did not think you would even notice. You barely come down from here. She stepped closer. Her hand reached toward my arm and stopped when I did not move. I am your mother. I have spent my whole life making sure both of my children had what they needed. You never needed the help. He does. Sign the paper. Let him have this one thing. Then you can go back to pretending none of us exist. My aunt spoke for the first time. Her voice was quiet and precise. The trust is already active on paper. Fighting it will only drag the brand into public records. Suppliers and partners will see the filings. Cassandra has already asked questions. She will ask more if this becomes a court matter. Is that the stability you want for the company you claim to care about more than family? I looked at my aunt. You coordinated the calls. You filed the amendment. You knew the signature was not mine. That is not family help. That is deliberate transfer without consent. My mother made a small broken sound. Then her voice rose again, unsteady and loud in the cold air. Do not talk to her like that. She was trying to protect your brother. You would rather see him fail than give up one empty cabin. You have always been this way. Even as a child, you kept score. Every favor, every dollar, every time we asked you to think about someone besides yourself. Now you are doing it with lawyers and banks. Because you think that makes you untouchable, it does not make you right. It makes you alone. The words came in a rush. Then she stopped. Her breathing was uneven. She looked at the folder in my aunt's hand and then back at me. The shift happened again fast. I can still fix this if you sign tonight. I can tell the lawyer it was a misunderstanding. Colin does not have to know how close this came. Your father does not have to know. We can keep it inside the family where it belongs. Just sign. I kept my voice level. The fraud review is already open. The gate logs show unauthorized visits. The call records are documented. I am not signing anything. I am not continuing any conversation after tonight. My mother stared at me. Her face moved through several expressions in a few seconds. Anger, disbelief, something that looked like genuine hurt. Then it settled into a cold, flat anger that did not waver. You are choosing this, she said. You are choosing to burn every remaining tie because you cannot stand the idea that someone else might benefit from something you own. Fine. When the brand takes the hit from this, when Cassandra and the others start asking real questions, remember that you had the chance to keep it quiet. Remember that I tried. She turned without waiting for an answer. My aunt closed the folder, gave me one last measured look, and followed. They got back into the vehicle. The light swept across the pines as they drove toward the gate. Marcus confirmed they had left the property 2 minutes later. I stayed on the porch for a while after the taillights disappeared. The cold had worked through my clothes. I went back inside and closed the door. The folder with the printed statements and logs was still on the desk. I added the gate alert and the time-stamped recording of the conversation. Then I called my lawyer and told him the visit had happened and that I wanted every record preserved and every channel of contact from my mother or her attorney routed through him only. The bank fraud review moved quickly after that. The mismatched signature and the pattern of transfers into the account tied to my brother triggered a formal hold. The slush fund was frozen pending investigation. My mother's name on 2 of the earlier authorizations became part of the file. My aunt's role in the trust filing was noted. The review did not result in criminal charges against either of them. It was treated as a family financial dispute that had crossed into unauthorized movement of assets. The cabin title was returned to the LLC I controlled. The trust was dissolved. The cost arrived in other places. Cassandra Bell called 2 days later and said she was stepping back from the supplier partnership we had been building for the next season. She cited uncertainty around ownership, stability, and family involvement in careful language. She had already spoken with 2 retail accounts. The conversations had been polite, but the questions had been direct. I bought out her remaining interest in the joint venture at a loss that required me to delay the planned expansion of the retreat schedule. The brand itself stayed intact. The growth slowed for one full quarter, while I restructured the supplier contracts and reassured the accounts that had heard versions of the story. My brother never called. My father sent one short message through my lawyer, stating that he wanted no further involvement. My mother sent 3 voicemails in the first week after the visit. Each one started with demands and ended with something close to pleading. I did not answer any of them. After the 3rd one, I had my lawyer send a single formal letter stating that all future communication would be through counsel only and that any attempt to contact me directly would be documented. She did not send another message. The cabin remained mine. The brand remained mine. The quiet that returned to the mountain was heavier than the quiet that had been there before. I had stopped the silent transfer. I had forced the records into the open. The slush fund that had fed my brother's account was now visible to the bank and to anyone who asked for the filings. My mother had not faced personal legal consequences beyond the embarrassment of the review. She still had my father and whatever remained of the family circle she had protected. I had the cabin and the work I had built. I also had the clear knowledge that the last remaining thread between us was cut, and that I had been the one to cut it. I stayed at the cabin through the winter. The work continued at a slower pace while I rebuilt the supplier relationships and adjusted the retreat calendar. Marcus Hale checked the system once a month and sent brief encrypted updates. No further unauthorized visits occurred. The brand recovered the lost quarter by spring. The growth was smaller than the plan I had carried before the envelope arrived, but it was steady and under my control. There were nights when the weight of the choice settled in the room with me. I had protected what I built. I had refused to let the silent rearrangement continue. The price had been the last possibility of any reconciliation, the partnership that had been meant to expand the brand and the quiet belief that blood might still mean something. If I simply stayed detached long enough, none of those things returned. What remained was the cabin, the work, and the boundary I had drawn, without apology or room for negotiation. I learned that releasing the toxic tie does not always arrive with relief. Sometimes it arrives with a smaller company, a quieter mountain, and the knowledge that the people who raised you will continue their lives without you and will not suffer the same cost you paid to leave. Chosen family in this case was not a crowd of new faces. It was the work itself and the precise limited trust I placed in the few people who had stayed professional when the pressure arrived. That was enough to keep going. It was not enough to erase the cost. I do not regret the boundary. I regret only that I once believed there was a version of this story where I could keep both the work and the possibility of family at the same time. That version never existed. I see that clearly now. The documents on the desk made it visible. The conversation on the porch made it final. Thank you for listening to my story.